Hello and welcome to World of Warbirds. I'm Brian Pierce. Please sign up at my Patreon to get episodes earlier, bonuses, to have a say on future content, and to interact with me and other Warbirders directly. But mainly you'll have the satisfaction of helping keep this podcast going. You can also toss me a tip via PayPal at WOWB17, or even just drop me a review. Thank you for your support. Now on to the show. Hello Warbirders. This time we start looking at Ju88 survivors. Nay, to be more precise, Ju88 defectors. But before starting, I want to welcome some new patrons. Welcome to Deagle, Salty G, and to Drew for getting on board and also helping out with picks for the replacement episode. Also to Vernon for continuing to supply us with his custom aviation artwork. I always include the link where you can look at his stuff and go check it out and, hey, maybe buy it. As for all of our new free members, Kai, Shoshanta, Jono, Jeremy, Thomas, and John, why not commit and join? So as you can see from the title, this is a part 3. I always knew that the whole story of the Ju88 would be a multi-parter, but frankly, today's episode was a surprise to me. Usually writing my survivor section is pretty easy, kind of like the walk across the parking lot back to the car after one of my Adirondack hikes. Relieved and with the end in sight. The survivor section usually goes something like this. So this plane was built so late in the war that it never made it to combat. So it was used to fly loads full of rubber dog poop out of Hong Kong for a few years. Then it fought fires in northern Saskatchewan. Was bought by a businessman who intended to fix it up, but went bankrupt before it was finally bought and restored by the Warbird Museum of Los Santos. Okay, so let's just say the two surviving Ju88 stories are nothing like that. All right, enough goofing around. Let's dive in. Given that more than 15,000 Junkers Ju88s of all variants were built during the war, their survival rate is tragically low. Today, there are only 2 completely intact, fully assembled Ju88s left in the entire world, with another in the process. So let's look at the story of the first. It was the afternoon of May 9th, 1943, and a Luftwaffe crew headed out to do a pre-flight on their Ju88 for a routine patrol out of Aalborg, Vesterland, Denmark. They were a well-seasoned peacetime crew, which meant that they had all signed up before the war. The pilot was Oberleutnant Herbert Schmidt. The wireless operator was Oberfeldwebel Paul Rosenberger, and Oberfeldwebel Eric Cantwell was the flight engineer. They readied their 88, Werk number 360043, climbed in, started up, ran up their engines, and then took off at 15:03. They headed northwest towards Norway. I've placed a map on the Patreon page, but in case you can't look right now, Denmark is like a pointy hat sitting on the top of Germany's head. Aalborg is right on the top of the hat, and above and to the left, across a portion of the North Sea called the Skagerrak, Norway plunges down like the lowest part of a chandelier. On the bottom tip of Norway is the city of Kristiansand. And it was here that the Ju88 flew to, landed at 16:03, and topped up her fuel tanks for a patrol out over the waters of Skagerrak. They departed at 16:50 and headed out over the water. 20 minutes later, though, they seemingly encountered a problem. 10 minutes after that, at 17:10, the wireless operator, Oberfeldwebel Paul Rosenberger, dialed his radio to Night Fighter HQ in Denmark and frantically broadcast an emergency message. The starboard engine is on fire. We are losing altitude. We are preparing to ditch. And then nothing more was heard. During the air-sea search and rescue later, all that was spotted was 3 inflatable life rafts, all empty. Nothing more was ever found. So that's it, eh? You would expect the next part of the story to be about a research vessel in the 1980s picking up the wreck on sonar, and then the raising effort that eventually led to a restoration, etc., etc. But no. Let's back up a bit and take a closer look at this crew. The pilot, Oberleutnant Herbert Schmid, sometimes written as Schmidt, just happened to be from a prominent anti-Nazi political family. His father had been a secretary to Gustav Stresemann, a prominent Weimar Republic foreign minister. Although a bit of a loner, he was well liked by the ground crew as well as his fellow flyers. His wireless operator, Oberfeldwebel Paul Rosenberger, however, was even more of a lone wolf type. According to accounts, he was actually not well liked by the others in the squadron, flyers or ground crews. We know less about Oberfeldwebel Erich Cantwell, the flight engineer. One thing that had been noticed about this crew, despite their long and albeit good service records, they had not shot anything down. The pilot was from a family that was decidedly not sympathetic to the Nazi cause. Some reports say that Schmidt and Rosenberger had served together in the Spanish Civil War and rather than being hardened by the conflict, had been sickened by their experiences. It seems pretty likely that Schmidt and Rosenberger had decided to be going through the motions, but be not very effective fighter pilots. The problem was this could only go on for so long without somebody really noticing, like officially noticing, and bringing them up on charges of what was known as, and give me a break here because it's quite a mouthful, Wehrkraftzersetzung, or subversion of the war effort. This charge covered subversion of the military forces, treason, and defeatism. The standard punishment for a combat crew found guilty of intentionally throwing missions or refusing to shoot was execution, usually via firing squad or hanging. If they were lucky, or if there was high-level political or bureaucratic intervention, they might have been declared verunwürdig, or unworthy of military service, and sent to a penal battalion instead. They would be stripped of all and any ranks, medals, and military honors and transferred to Battalion 500 or 999. These were effectively suicide squads used for high-fatality ground-clearing operations, clearing minefields by hand or holding isolated trenches on the Eastern Front under brutal supervision. Survival rates were nearly zero. Perhaps even worse, in Nazi Germany, military punishments rarely stopped with the individual soldier, especially as the war dragged into 1943. Under the legal doctrine of Sippenhaft, shared family guilt, the state punished the relatives of traitors too, confiscating their properties and sending them to concentration camps. So if the threat from their convictions was bad and perhaps getting worse as the war turned more desperate, the tests of their loyalty were also getting harder to pass. Earlier that month, they had been sent out to intercept an unarmed civilian BOAC aircraft on a flight from Scotland to Sweden. Now, if you've been listening for a while, you might remember that these, in quotation marks, civilian flights weren't exactly that. These flights came up in the Mozzie episode. Sweden was a neutral country, but the Brits still wanted to get some high-value things such as diplomatic bags, POW mail, and propaganda such as magazines and newspapers into Sweden, and precision ball bearings and machine tool steel out of Sweden. To do this questionable activity, they used some civilianized de Havilland mosquitoes that were registered with civilian markings and were operated by crews who were, in quotes, civilian employees of the British Overseas Airways Corporation, BOAC. So these flights had dual protection in a way, They were, in quotes, civilian and thus legally protected against attack. But laws aren't actually steel plate armor, as can be seen what happened to BOAC Flight 777 in just a couple of weeks, on the 1st of June 1943. The flight was a civilian Douglas DC-3 and was attacked and crashed into the Bay of Biscay, killing all 17 on board, including actor Leslie Howard, who played Ashley Wilkes in the movie Gone with the Wind. Guess what type of aircraft had gone after Flight 777? Yes, 8 Junkers Ju88s. Beyond the flimsy paper legal protection, the other protection that the Mozzie BOAC flights had was speed. If intercepting Luftwaffe fighters came up to investigate, the Mozzie pilots could always just push the balls to the wall and run. So when the order came to Schmidt and Rosenberger to shoot down the BOAC Mozzie, maybe that's what happened. Or at least they could say that's what happened when they got back with no kill. Yeah, he ran away. We couldn't catch him. But this excuse was not going to last forever. Schmidt's motivation might have even been stronger. Modern archival declassification suggests that Schmidt had been quietly leaking intelligence to the Allies ever since 1940. Maybe he sensed the Gestapo circling and had decided that the gig was up. So, what really happened 20 minutes into their patrol? I wonder if there was a brief, "Are we really going to do this thing?" conversation? Because this decision was one of those irreversible ones that would change theirs and potentially their families' lives forever. But the die was cast, and at 17:10, wireless operator Paul Rosenberger dialed his radio to Night Fighter HQ in Denmark and faked the frantic emergency message. "The starboard engine is on fire. We are losing altitude. We are preparing to ditch." Actually, it was probably keyed out in Morse code, but it was more fun to say that. The pilot, Schmidt, actually throttled back and dropped the heavy twin-engine fighter down to wave-top level to slip completely beneath German radar coverage, and the crew dumped their 3 inflatable life rafts into the sea as evidence of their ditching and being lost at sea. Now, some reports state that Eric Cantwell, the flight engineer and third man out, was an unwilling participant and balked when he realized what was happening and that they had turned towards the west. You can be sure that this will be played up to the max if Hollywood ever makes a movie about this event. For fun, let's play it out. "Oberleutnant Schmidt, there's nothing wrong with the engine. Why are we flying the wrong way?" "Eric, we are not flying the wrong way. We are flying the right way. And the true way. Tonight we will eat haggis with a glass of good scotch. It will taste like freedom." "Nein, Schmidt, I will not allow us to be traitors to the fatherland." Cantwell unclips his safety harness and begins to move forward. "If I cannot persuade you to move back and be hanged honorably by a piano wire noose, I will fight the controls from you and dive this aircraft into the waves." And then Cantwell lurches at Schmidt, and they grapple with the controls for about 10 minutes, with the airplane flying all over the sky, going inverted and dragging a wingtip through the waves, and somehow not crashing, before Rosenberger, who had been sitting calmly so far, speaks up over the intercom. "Eric, it is time to sit down and be a good boy." "Who will make me?" "Me," said Rosenberger. "And Herr Luger," he said while pointing his service pistol, racked the slide and pointed it at Cantwell's head in the cramped cockpit cabin. "Haggis is indeed on the menu for tonight." Anyway, it will make for a very dramatic scene, and I do hope they make the movie one day. But there is no actual evidence that it happened that way at all, and plenty to indicate that it didn't. Also, I apologize to all and every German speaker out there for the playful accents. Are you enjoying the show? Please help support it at World of Warbird's Patreon. It's only $5 a month, and there are advantages such as getting the episodes a week early, getting bonus episodes, and having a say on future content. Also, being able to interact with me directly through the group chat. If you're presently listening to this Patreon, well then thank you for your support. Also, you can give me a good review or share me with a friend. It all helps, and I appreciate it more than you know. As the Ju88 crossed the Scottish coast north of Aberdeen, Schmidt began circling Peterland, knowing that the British radar would pick him up. And indeed they did. And 2 RAF Spitfires from 165 Squadron, flown by an American, Flight Lieutenant Arthur Art Roscoe, and a Canadian, Sergeant Ben Scammon, were scrambled to intercept. When they arrived at Peterland, they saw that the Ju88 was behaving strangely. It deliberately lowered his landing gear, waggled his wings frantically, and fired off a succession of colorful Vari-flares. Recognizing the surrender signals, the Spitfire pilots didn't press the trigger. Roscoe pulled his Spitfire right in front of the Ju88's glazed nose to act as an escort, while Scammon tracked from behind, shepherding the German night fighter down onto the tarmac at RAF Dice. The AA gunners at Dice didn't know what the heck was going on, and they fired a few rounds, but luckily no one was hurt. The Ju88 landed, and so did the Spits. British military police instantly surrounded the aircraft and immediately cleared the tarmac of all casual observers. Schmidt thanked the Spitfire pilots for not shooting them down and gave his life jacket to Roscoe, who would wear it instead of his own issued Mae West for the remainder of the war. The bigger gift to the Allied war effort, though, was the Ju88 itself. It was packed with Germany's top-secret Fug 202 Liechtenstein airborne radar system. It was later flown by a Polish RAF pilot to Farnborough, escorted by Beaufighters. There, it was assigned the British military serial number PJ876 and stripped of its Luftwaffe markings in favor of RAF rondels and a yellow prototype P designation. It was handed over to number 1426, enemy aircraft flight, famously known as the Raffwaffe, a specialized unit tasked with evaluating captured German hardware. Within weeks of its capture, the British used PJ876 to conduct extensive night flying trials against British heavy bombers, like the Handley Page Halifax. By analyzing the radar signals emitted by the Liechtenstein array, British scientific intelligence expert Professor R.J. Jones and his team were able to analyze the exact frequencies the Germans were using. This directly enabled the British to develop effective electronic jamming countermeasures and optimize the deployment of window chaff, the aluminum strips dropped by RAF bombers to completely blind German radar sets. It is estimated that this single captured plane saved thousands of Allied airmen's lives. Once the war was over, the vast majority of captured Luftwaffe aircraft were unceremoniously scrapped, melted down, or used as target practice. PJ876 managed to escape the smelter due to its monumental historical status. It bounced around for years, slowly awaiting a permanent home. By the mid-1970s, the Royal Air Force recognized the need to properly conserve its unique collection of Axis technical history. In 1975, the aircraft was sent to the large maintenance base at RAF St. Alphen in Wales. There, RAF technicians undertook a meticulous, non-flying restoration of the airframe. They repaired decades of storage wear, reassembled the airframe, and repainted it to its authentic, historical 1943 Luftwaffe night fighter camouflage. complete with its original tactical squadron codes D5EV. Following its restoration, the aircraft was officially acquired by RAF Museum. It was placed on public display at the museum's primary location in Hendon, North London. For nearly 40 years, it sat as a centerpiece of the Battle of Britain Hall, marveling visitors as the world's only intact, surviving example of a specialized Ju88 night fighter variant. In 2017, the RAF Museum made the strategic decision to reorganize its collections. The Ju88 was carefully dismantled by museum technicians and transported 130 miles via road to its sister site, the RAF Museum Midlands, commonly known as RAF Cosford in Shropshire. Today, Werk number 360043 stands fully reassembled and prominently displayed inside Cosford's War in the Air hangar. It is showcased alongside other incredibly rare Axis aircraft of the period. It is one of the only two surviving, intact Junkers Ju88s preserved in aviation museums worldwide, the other being a bomber variant at the National Museum of the USAF in Dayton, Ohio. More on that one soon. Well, what about the crew? It seems like the dramatic story of the showdown over the ocean was nothing more than a dramatic rumor. All three crews seem to be very willing anti-Nazis, as can be seen by their choices during and after the defection. If they had really just wanted out of the war, they could have easily flown to neutral Sweden and sat out the rest of the conflict in an internment camp. But no, they took the risk of flying their aircraft to the enemy, where it could be of use to help defeat the Luftwaffe. And even then, they could have just entered the British POW system to, again, simply wait out the conflict. But no, they chose to actively help the British against their former comrades. They were all given new identities and a backstory to officially separate them from the Ju88 defection. The new story was that they had been supposedly picked up in Gibraltar. They then worked with British intelligence in a variety of ways, some truly fiendish. One job was to play the role of fellow Luftwaffe POWs to extract intelligence from new arrivals. They also provided info for radio propaganda shows, including one called Gustav Siegfried I, GS1. The tactic behind this radio program was to provide 90% accurate, highly verifiable, up-to-date German news and information, and the remaining 10%, known as dirt, would be subtle, manufactured rumors designed to cause panic, mutiny, and distrust. Schmid, now known as Steiner, with his new identity, helped tailor this, knowing exactly what the Luftwaffe personnel wanted or didn't want to hear. The premise of the radio program was that it was an illegal, clandestine, shortwave transmitter operated by a rogue group of ultra-nationalist, old-school Prussian military officers broadcasting from inside Germany. The host, broadcasting under the moniker Der Chef, the chief, was actually an actor named Peter Seckelmann, a German refugee. He spoke with flawless military authority, ranted with fierce patriotism, and regularly dropped shocking, highly vulgar profanity. What made Der Chef so believable was he was not anti-Germany, he was anti-Nazi. He furiously claimed that Hitler's inner circle, the Gestapo, the SS, and corrupt party bureaucrats, were fat, soft, hedonistic cowards who were betraying the brave soldiers fighting on the front lines. He would broadcast specific, highly localized gossip, announcing the names of fictional or real Gestapo officials allegedly throwing lavish orgies with champagne and meat, while ordinary German citizens were starving. This created immense domestic paranoia, leading the real Gestapo to waste thousands of man-hours hunting for a mobile truck-mounted radio transmitter that did not exist. The station developed strong listenership, hungry for facts and juicy rumors and forbidden music such as jazz. Imagine their horror when in late 1943, when they were listening live and they heard the sound of a door being kicked down, loud shouting in German, a hail of gunfire, and Der Chef being executed live on air by the Gestapo. It was all faked, of course. The Brits had decided that the station had run its useful course. Another piece of nasty work that our defected crew performed was a letter-writing campaign to the relatives of deceased servicemen. When British intelligence were able to ascertain the names of German personnel who had died away from Germany, they would spring into action to write to the man's family. There were different schemes, but they were all designed to create chaos and distrust. One technique was to fake a comrade who had been in the hospital with the loved one. He would write to report that their son had been wounded, yes, but with what the Allied troops called a $1 million wound, one bad enough to be out of the conflict, but still survived to be sent home safely. Instead, the letter writer wrote, authorities had judged him to be too severe to be useful as a soldier anymore, and so was euthanized by lethal injection by the doctors to free up a bed for a soldier that could. Ouch. Other letters were supposedly from service members who had faked their own deaths to avoid serving the evil regime and were now in neutral countries. These served many purposes. It undermined German citizens' trust in their government. It also triggered fear that they themselves might be caught up in the Sippenhaft, the shared family guilt thing that I spoke of earlier. Many families turned in their letters to the Gestapo in fear or to cover their own butts, setting off a wild goose chase that wasted the secret police's force resources. Imagine the family's double devastation later when they found out for the second time that their loved ones were indeed dead. War is hell for sure. After the war, the 3 crewmen of our defecting Ju88 lived under and were even buried with their assumed identities. And we are lucky to have their plane to marvel at when remembering their story. So, coming up, we will have the last part of the Ju88 series. We need to look at the other defector, the one that ended up in the USA. It really is quite the story. Thanks again to my Patreon supporters. You guys keep me getting up at 5 a.m. to make this show. You can also check out some photos of what we've been talking about over on the Patreon page. These are available to all. Why not join Patreon? There is a free option to join, and if you can't, why not leave me a review? Until next time.